Hi, so I decided, and I'm capable of finally putting this up here for you all. I have some health issues. It's the only reason I know the things that I know about law. I've had time to lay in bed for years, unfortunately, not of my own choosing. So I've studied a lot of things. One of them happens to be law. And there's an extreme amount of fraud and treason being committed right now. Most of you are pretty much aware of this, but what I'm going to give you guys is the things that I've filed and let you see the information that I've been able to pull out of the Hawaii website online. The government, the legislative branch has the Hawaii Constitution and statutes all up online. Also, the criminal and traffic code book issued by LexisNexis. I believe mine is from 2013. They have modified some things. They hid the fact that the only driver's license that they issue is a commercial driver's license. In the 2013 legislative acts, they went and modified one of the sections that indicated that the commercial driver's license is to be stamped with the CDL, denoting that it's a commercial driver's license. They went and they modified their code to hide this fact, and now it doesn't mention anything about that, but they are still stamping them that way. I know people over here, I've seen them, it has CDL on it. California used to do the same thing. They pulled it off, which, man, I could get very tangential here, so let's just pull it back in. But basically, what you're going to see is everything that I've put together from things that they've issued, and this motion to dismiss was dismissed by Judge Udovic without him actually having read anything, even though on the record he stated twice that he read it in its entirety. And the reason I know he didn't read it is because attached to this I included copies of letters that I had sent out to the prosecuting attorney office requesting certain things be addressed, which they never contacted me about, and they tacitly agreed to certain things that I had stated by failing to communicate with me. So those were attached, and during the one hearing, the judge, I asked him, are you familiar with these letters? You know, blah, 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 and I described exactly what they were. There was nothing vague about my description. And he said, I don't have any letters. I'm not familiar with that. And at the time, I didn't catch it because I was exhausted. I was sleep deprived. Every single one of these hearings I've gone into, I've been sleep deprived because you never know what these cheats and frauds are going to do. So later I realized, I was like, wait a minute. This guy just said he didn't know what this was, and it's actually attached to this motion to dismiss that you're going to see. And I reference those letters multiple times, and yet he didn't know what they were, so he lied. He never read this, and he dismissed it outright. But I do think they understand I'm a headache guy because of what I've read and what I've entered, and if it goes above them, it could be a problem. So, alright, enough rambling. Let's let you look at this. The citation number is right there, and you can look that up if you need to. You can go do search for Hawai'i Kokua, that's Kokua, and they have the online docket so you can see what's been filed. They don't actually include everything. There are cheats about that too. I'm not going to go into everything, but I have made certain requests. I have actual file stamped copies of things that I've submitted that they did not enter into the record because they didn't want the appeals court to to actually see the video that included, the exchange between me and the judge. It's pretty damning and it makes them look bad. So, alright, basically I'm attacking jurisdiction. This is exactly what I did in California. They will never ever admit that they don't have jurisdiction. It's their Achilles heel. In California, the judge had to come up with her own excuse to dismiss the case, but this is what I hammered, the jurisdiction issue and the fact that the prosecution violates due process like every step of the way with the alleged conferring of jurisdiction upon the court. I'm saying alleged because they don't do what they're required to do to actually confer, to give jurisdiction to the court. You can benefit by doing Google searches on some of these phrases that I use, like confer jurisdiction. If you do Google searches on things like that, you will come across cases that use these phrases, and they describe what's required to make things valid at law. Let's see here. Alright, so this is the initial statement, and again, it's a special appearance. This is something well established in law. Special appearance is something that occurs when somebody wants to challenge the jurisdiction, and when you do this, you're not attacking any facts, nothing related to the facts of the case. This is a procedural issue. Now, you're going to get some dumbasses that come onto my channel, and they'll be like, oh, you didn't win, it was a technicality, blah, blah, blah. When they say that, they're not acknowledging that I have studied the law well enough to know that if I call them out on a due process violation, which is by law they're required to do, say, X, Y, and Z, and they haven't done X, Y, and Z, or maybe they've only done Z, but they didn't do X and Y, and I call them on it, and if you keep hammering on that because you have the right to due process, they have to do those things. If you hammer them on it, the court should eventually drop the case. They'll come up with their own excuse, because again, they cannot acknowledge this. They're across the nation. I helped somebody in Arkansas beat a case on this. I beat the case in California based on this. I've come across tons of other people's cases. These are buried things. You're not going to find them. They're very difficult to find. It took me a lot of time to find this stuff. But when you challenge them on these things, they will kick it out. They typically kick it out on other reasons, because if they acknowledge it, you can turn around and take what they acknowledge and file it into this lawsuit against the prosecutor for due process violations. And you can sue the judge too for acting outside of, for acting without all jurisdiction. And judges are only liable when they don't act with jurisdiction. Everything that I'm telling you is something I'm entitled to tell you pursuant to the First Amendment and the Ninth Amendment. I don't need a law license to tell you this. I'm not licensed to practice law. I would never join that club. I think there are people in there that didn't realize what they were getting into, and it's too late, and they've already put up an oath, and it is what it is. It's like joining something without having full disclosure, and by the time they get full disclosure, they're in too deep to really do anything about it. But anyways, back to the special appearance. If you do this, what you should, the first thing you need to do is go to the court and request a copy of the file for the case. So up here, this citation number is what you would give the traffic clerk, and you want to get certified copies of everything. You may have to pay an extra $1 or $2. It wouldn't be a bad idea to get 2 copies, because one you may save and use as evidence, file it into evidence. Alright, so you want to do that, and if the clerk doesn't have anything, that's an even bigger problem. But if all they have is that ticket from the cop, then generally they don't have what they need in place to actually create a case. What they need to create a case is a filed complaint signed and verified by a prosecuting attorney. A case is something where the state is alleging allegations against somebody, and basically a cop doesn't have a license to practice law, so he can't represent the state, and whatever he files is actually just alleged evidence. It's not a complaint. They can call it a complaint. It's not. It doesn't. If you pull out one of the code manuals, you'll see. You can actually read what defines a complaint, what elements are required for it. Same thing with a summons. Let's see here. So let's try to move this along. It's late and I'm tired and I'm going to start rambling. There's just so many threads to this. It's you can go all over the place. Alright, so I'm pointing out the fact here that I'm a citizen of the Republic of California, different from the state of California. Some of you may be familiar with the Buck Act. If not, look it up, figure some things out. You're dealing with a matrix here. They've overlaid one system on top of another, and let's see. The fact that I'm not a citizen or resident of the state of Hawaii does have a very significant role here. The whole licensing setup is something for residents or citizens of a state. I'm here in or on the big island of Hawaii. I would not say that I'm in the state of Hawaii. That's a legal fiction. But again, these are things that they will try to avoid as much as possible, especially if they're really familiar with it, because I honestly don't think all lawyers are even familiar with the racket that's going on here with things like the I just mentioned it, the Buck Act. But anyways, the reason why I point this out is because each state has passed in their vehicle code a section called a section dealing with a quote-unquote license compact agreement between other states. So when somebody goes into the DMV and they request a license and they are issued that license, they have to follow all the rules, everything that applies to it for the state in which it's issued. And then by extension, the legal code that was created for the license compact agreement between states, essentially they agree to follow all other states' laws. So when they go into another state, they have to adhere to the traffic laws of that state. And if they don't, they can be held liable based on the laws in that state, and it can come back to bite them in the butt in their home state. So, if they don't deal with the matter in the other state, like if they just pass through and don't even bother to show up to court or pay whatever fine or whatever. Whether they're guilty or not is another issue. But anyways, I bring that up because this is something I never agreed to. I didn't agree to the terms that they have. And this thing that I'm pointing out right here, I kind of threw it in. I'd come across it. I wasn't sure if it would fly. I have my solid core items that I work on, and those are issues that got me out of the thing in California. This thing was put in kind of last minute without being able to research it as much as I would like to, and after having researched it more, I wouldn't add something of this nature again. I think that this will fail every single time. This isn't something they're really concerned with. There's been a lot of rulings on it, and the way that the higher courts handle it, that's not something that would benefit somebody. So, again, you guys can dig into it and look at it, but look at it deeper. Do not make this particular thing where you're dealing with the United States Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, as a some sort of a defense, it's not applicable from what I looked at later, from what they had said and what I looked at. It just isn't applicable. It's something that they can kind of use against you. So it's better to have a more solid brief, in my opinion, and not stick things like this in, because they'll hang their hat on those sorts of things and try to like cause you problems with that. All right, so here I get into the whole state driver's license compact agreements. It's most of you will probably want to, if you're trying to deal with your own cases or get this stuff set up in advance, which is the smart thing. If you're going to do any sort of rights activist work, you want this stuff set up in advance. These arguments, these documents, you want a boilerplate sort of thing set up. So what I'm talking about here with the state driver's licensing compact is entirely valid. It doesn't fully tie in with this, but with this section here, let me see if I can highlight it. I'm trying to get used to this software, and like I said, I'm tired. It's almost 2 in the morning. Alright, so don't use this, in my opinion. It's a bad idea to try using that. However, this, if you don't have a driver's license and you do get pulled over in another state, you can certainly raise this issue. Alright, so, and as you can see, I'm already bringing up the issue of, whether or not the prosecuting attorney has even lawfully brought charges in a case. I'll let you guys read this. Alright, so here's where I get into the letter. Alright, this is my 3rd paragraph, and, this Judge Udovic wasn't aware of or familiar with these letters, even though I reference it in my 3rd paragraph and actually had it attached, stapled onto this motion. So you can read this. I mean, basically I'm setting them up. So the way they have it, most of us are just going around doing whatever, and they already have an aggressive chessboard set up against us. And you go in there and they start hammering away at you, and that's it. You wind up leaving without money, even if you're not guilty in many cases. That happened to me at least once when I was younger, and I did have some speeding tickets, which I absolutely was speeding, but looking back on it, guess what? I wasn't engaged in commerce. Now, I may have had a plate on there, but all of the laws that they make are tied in with regulating traffic, and traffic is commerce. So, let's see. So this is a setup, and I already knew from dealing with the DA in California, these guys tend not to respond. I had to contact the DA in California I think 3 or 4 times before they actually finally responded. But the beauty of that response was they actually gave me what I wanted. They told me that they hadn't initiated prosecution. That is a very bad thing for a court. They're supposed to be handling a case that was initiated by a prosecutor. And I come in with a letter actually signed by one of the prosecuting attorneys saying they did not initiate prosecution. That's a bad thing. So, and I still didn't win my lawsuits because these judges in the federal level are helping to protect this racket where they've taken people that are not engaged in commerce, they've lumped them in with people that are engaged in commerce on the roads, and in fact they make up the vast majority of people that they're stealing money from and processing through courts. And the vast majority of people out there on the road are not engaged in commerce. They're just using it to go from A to B, do whatever. But that's where the money is. If you're only hitting people for certain amounts of money, and they have to make the fines a certain level where people in general may just want to pay them to not have to deal with going into court. This is all behavioral science. And so, by making it easy for people to just pay and not have to go in because they would make more money at work or whatever, people do it, and so they're extorting people in that manner. Now, right here, I'm asking right off the bat, if they have any discovery packet for me, and they're the ones that are supposed to have that, and I'm playing stupid here. If not, I mean, it really works to your benefit to play stupid on some of these things. You just have to know what you're setting them up for, how you want them to respond, and just play stupid on some of the issues. They'll never know. They can't tell who's stupid and who isn't. And, if you handle things a certain way, you'll get the pieces of information that are going to hurt them, and it could be used in suits against them. You won't necessarily win, because they're protecting this racket, and there aren't enough people that actually care, even. Okay, I had a little trouble there, so we're going to try to start this over. Or continue, I should say, and I'll have to redo the video at the beginning. Anyway, let's see. Right here I asked for the names of the attorneys who decided to initiate prosecution, if it was initiated. And that's critical, because only an attorney out of their office, or somewhere in the state, but a government of Hawaii employed prosecuting attorney, or potentially deputy prosecuting attorney, can initiate prosecution by filing a verified complaint with the requisite information included. Alright, so here I continue to talk about this, blah blah blah, play stupid, and you want to request that they respond within a certain amount of time, and if they don't respond, which they're not going to, this is where you set up your default. So you just say you're willing to accept their tacit agreement to the following presumptions if they could not respond in time. And so here are my presumptions that they agreed to by not responding. One, that I should request discovery of materials from the officer who issued the citations. That's playing stupid. Let's see. He does have some materials, though. He actually does have some stuff you need to contact him for, in general, to get that info. Let's see. And this one right here, this is the zinger, that the prosecuting attorney's office was not handling the initiation of prosecution of the traffic citations issued to me. They're the only ones that can. So when they don't respond, they're agreeing to me saying that, and that's a presumption right there that I'm laying out. And by them not responding within the time I requested, which is 7 days, it's entirely reasonable. You have to do something reasonable. Don't do something stupid like 1 day. Be reasonable, because the more reasonable you are when you lay this out and they actually don't do what they should have done, it makes them look even worse. So 7 days, a week is entirely reasonable. Let's see. So they didn't respond to that, and let's see. All my future inquiries should be directed to the officer who initiated the traffic stop and issued the citations. And let's see. And in the letters, I asked to be corrected if any of these statements here were incorrect. So they did not respond at all, and they did not correct me. How's that going to look? That makes them look bad. I set up aggressive chess pieces right there. That's what you want to do. And if people start doing this sort of thing by moving their pawns and their knights out so that they're already in a position where they're ready to attack as soon as the court moves and does certain things that it shouldn't be doing at that point in time, because the prosecutor hasn't done their job, and the court shouldn't be doing anything either. But if you have these pieces set up, it's going to make them look bad, and it's going to show, that they're violating its initial steps of showing that they're violating due process. All right, right here, as of this date, they had not responded. Then I went ahead and issued another letter out, and again, they don't respond. They're busy stealing from a lot of people, and they do have some legitimate cases, before them. But there's a lot of stealing that's going on, and they have more on their plate than they can handle, and they complain about this. Oh, the courts are overflowing. Well, you're too busy stealing from a whole lot of people. If you weren't stealing from anybody in the first place, you would absolutely have the resources you need to be doing what you should be doing, which is prosecuting actual crimes, and not unlawfully conveying that the law is allegedly one thing when it totally states another, and using that to steal from people. Most of these people ought to be, we all know what ought to happen with them. They ought to be tried before a jury of their peers, and most of what them are doing is treason. Execute them. Don't play around with these people. They're very dangerous. They're incredibly dangerous, and they're in dangerous positions for the rest of us. So let's get back on topic here. Let's see. Okay, so initially I repeated the same line of inquiry. The main thing is this issue right here of who's initiating prosecution, or if it has been initiated. You can rephrase it, but this is the key right here. Google this phrase. You'll get some very useful cases on that. It doesn't matter what state they're from. Every state requires that they do these things. In terms of what cases you cite, that does matter, depending on what state you're in. But the rules, the functional application is all the same. You can learn from other states. All right, let's see. All right, so I'm pointing out they haven't responded again to correct any errors to repeated presumptions. All right, and here I filed mandatory judicial notices that I make note of. Now, to make something a mandatory judicial notice, you need to go to your state statutory code, and you need to find the section on the rules of evidence. And in the rules of evidence, as you can see here, you will find sections dealing with the entering of evidence. Feel free to Google this stuff so you get an idea of what it looks like in general, and you can hunt down the same rules for your state, because they're going to be there. These are fundamentals. Let's see. So essentially, mandatory judicial notice, again, you should do all these things, but it doesn't mean that the judges are going to listen. As in my case, the guy didn't even read the thing, and he just ignored it. But to make it mandatory that they take notice of these things, in general, what you need to do is the laws or the cases that you're concerned with, you need to look them up, get the citations. You may need to contact your state law clerks at this, whatever the central archive is for your legislative acts and cases. In California, they're located up in Sacramento. In Hawaii, they're located over in Honolulu. But those clerks will tell you what they need from the citation: the name of the case, the year. If it's an act, they'll need to know the chapters, the year, things of that nature. And when you give the clerk that, they can go and get copies of the actual original, and you ask them to certify it. And when they certify it, that's one of the things that makes it a thing that the judge has to take note of. They don't have a choice. It has to be entered into evidence. You'll have to read through your rules of evidence again to see everything, but I don't think that this varies from one state to another. As long as those things are certified as official by a clerk, you're going to be in good shape. But again, every single one of these things I'm telling you, look it up for your state. Be on top of these things, know it, because if you know it, you can pull it out on them in court if you need to. Just call them. If you get the stuff down well enough, you'll start being able to repeat these. You can look them right in the eye and cite the code. That's intimidating for them to have to deal with somebody that's sitting there behind the table and has an unorthodox approach. They haven't gone through law school, but damn, this person's citing everything. and they're not looking down at any notes. So these things are useful. Let's see here. What's next? Alright, so I'm bringing up the issue of who's supposed to represent the state of Hawaii. And we've got this here. Again, go through, look up every single one of these things so you can understand what I did, and turn around and apply the same functional equivalent arguments in your state. This case isn't over yet. I have no idea how it'll go. I should be able to get it kicked out. I've done more than enough to get it kicked out at this point. The big thing, I think, is trying to keep the pressure on them, public pressure. That's why I'm putting this out too. This thing's got to break. It has to break. It's so corrupt, and people see it, and the more people that start giving them a headache when they go in there, the less they're going to get done, and the less they can rob us, and other people are going to see it, and eventually there's going to be, hopefully, a mass of people that will start pulling these people, hopefully just pass voter initiatives where they ban the Bar Association from the state, pull these judges off the bench, ban the lawyers. Just, Google the original 13th Amendment. Attorneys were never supposed to be in government positions for the reason that we're seeing right here with this corruption. You got attorneys in the legislative branch, the judiciary, and the executive, and they're all, basically collaborating. And the idea was, to break those things up so that, they don't collaborate. Well, these guys are collaborating. They're all a part of the bar. Let's see. But look that stuff up, because I think that's ultimately the direction things have to go if there's going to be any sort of peaceful resolution of what these guys are doing with their fraud and treason. Alright, so going through this, basically you can see here, who's supposed to prosecute this. And again, they've been negligent because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And actually, this is a misdemeanor when they don't do their duties. And I raised this fact in court. It's a thing that they could be held liable for in Hawaii. I forget what the code is, but it's basically something where they do commit a crime, and it's brought to the attention of the court, and it can be outside of the court or in the court where it occurs, but they can be held immediately liable. And the judge isn't going to do that to them. They're on the same team, and the judge didn't do it. And I raised these issues. So let's see. Yeah, they never responded. Talk about the presumptions here. I'll talk about how they violated their oath, because see, when they didn't respond and they agreed to what I had put forth, but then I wound up having to go into court and they're trying to lay charges on me, even though they didn't do everything they needed to. They didn't even orally recite the charges. They'd let the judge sit there and do that. That's not the judge's job. The judge is actually prohibited from practicing law from the bench. He's not supposed to be doing that. In fact, again, this is a video I still have to release, but the official transcripts and video are, well, at least for the video, it's a proprietary thing, and if you want to get it up on YouTube, you have to basically decode the video, and you have to use analog recording to record the audio, and then you have to try to line it all up. I haven't done all that. I'm not healthy enough to carry through on all this stuff. Hopefully I'll be able to get that up at some point, but I did get the judge stating that he didn't even have a complaint. I actually had him state that in the first hearing, and he should have dismissed it right then and there, but he ordered me to come back. On what authority did he do that? He had no authority. There was no complaint even before him. He had this incompetent deputy prosecutor, I believe his name was Evans Smith, I think that's it. The guy's incompetent. He was caught off guard with what I was doing, but he's completely incompetent. They pulled him off of this after he wrote his second reply to one of my motions. The guy, he's like an affirmative action hire, just absolutely incompetent. It is amusing to read the responses, though. But let's see, back to this. They can be sued in their personal capacity for violating their oath. Let's see. Alright, case file here, where we bring up the issue of no verified complaint or information with the charges in a plain and concise, definite statement of the essential facts constituting the offense charged. These are requirements. This paragraph right here is loaded with information that you need to study and that you should use. Okay, this took me a while to get all these things put together and distilled. There's other people who had some of these things out there. The one guy, Lawyer Dude, his name is Douglas Palashik. He's passed on. Thank you, Lawyer Dude, for everything you did and put up, and the fact that you got disbarred for fighting this shows that there are honest lawyers out there, but they're going to get screwed and messed with big time if they try to do anything against the system. You can look up Edgar Steele. He's another lawyer that got framed up for speaking out against the powers that are running things right now. They framed him for allegedly trying to use a pipe bomb to kill his wife. It's an absolute frame-up job. Let's see. So Edgar Steele and Doug Palashik. But if you look up, if you Google Lawyer Dude and motions, you may be able to find some of his web pages that are still available, and you'll be able to find boilerplate type material and a lot of information that's very, very useful. There's other people starting to use Lawyer Dude now that pop up in Google hits. They aren't the real deal. They're not him. You'll have to maybe do a little bit of hunting. He's got like some oddball website URLs, but you'll know it when you see it. And you can also do this might lead you to him. Do a search on Lawyer Dude and then Charles Sprinkle. He's the guy that did the writing for the files for Charles Sprinkle, who many of you may have already seen interviews with him with, I believe it's Richard Wagner, who I was going to do an interview with, but my health just isn't great, and you know, to be quite frank, I'm not really interested in doing this stuff much anymore. But I'll tell you what, I'm not going to let them like do me like this, and I'm going to do what I want to do as a free man. And if they want to try to misapply law to me, I'm going to take it to them. But yeah, I believe Richard Wagner, if you look him up, you can find the videos on Charles Sprinkle, and if you watch that, you'll find out some info. But Charles Sprinkle had Lawyer Dude, Doug Palashik, behind him, helping to lay out things like these issues with the verified complaint, the fact that the charges need to be written in a form that the lay individual can understand. I mean, you can get in a case completely thrown out, no returned, by the fact that they don't give you charges in plain language. And let's see, you do not, if you hire a lawyer to represent you, you can't use these arguments, because then it's going to be an issue of whether or not the lawyer did what they were supposed to do. They're there as your translator because you've decided that you require a lawyer. Now, do not take this on if you're not willing to study, not willing to read. You have to do this stuff on your own, and it can't just be all YouTube. 90% of what I've done has been reading, and maybe 10% has been picking through YouTube things and finding useful things here and there. But 90% of it's been reading code, and you're either cut out for it or you aren't. And it may be rough at first. Give it a little bit of time, you'll pick it up. It's like learning another language, but it's not as difficult, in my opinion, as learning another language. But you have to put some time and effort into it, and do it before you start practicing rights. Don't do it after. That's just not intelligent. Alright, let's see. You want to look these up. and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about with these sentences here. Let's see. There's an unverified copy of a citation, and make sure, you have to be very careful with words. You know, that thing filed by the cop is a citation. It's not a complaint. They're going to call it a complaint. They want you to think it's a complaint and accept it as a complaint, because then they can move forward. It's not a complaint. It's like this one guy, Buzz somebody, who had filed a motion for dismissal. His thing is posted on Lawyer Dude's website, but you know, he starts out his motion with the question, how many legs does a sheep have if you count the tail as a leg? And the answer is 4, because even if you call the tail a leg, it's not a leg. And so, you know, calling a citation a complaint is not, it doesn't make it a complaint. It isn't. And in my case, when you're pulled over, just because you've been seized, that's a seizure. Just because you've been seized does not mean it's a traffic stop. You had to be engaged in the activity of traffic for it to actually be a traffic stop. Otherwise, it's a seizure. Plain and simple. There's no traffic involved. They can't apply whatever rules they came up with for traffic to it, or traffic stops, because you weren't engaged in traffic. And I've made this in a recent argument here. Let's see. Let's keep going. It's taking forever. Alright, so I'm attacking the manner in which it was supposed to have been issued for being able to deem it a complaint. And, you know, any case in which it's lawful for a police officer to arrest a person without a warrant for a misdemeanor, petty misdemeanor, or violation. Here's the thing. They can't arrest you for a violation. They can't ever arrest you for that. It's not lawful. And we'll get to that. But just because they include it here in the code, just because they include this right here, does not mean that they've got a section. It doesn't mean that they've got a section set up stating that it's lawful for them to arrest for, you know, a violation of X. They've got it set up for, you know, petty misdemeanors and for misdemeanors, but they don't have, like, violation is a fine or fee only offense. They can never lawfully arrest you for that. Let's see. So, you know, they say here that they can issue a citation in lieu of the requirements of Section A. You're gonna have to look that up. I don't have it here, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. But it's Section A in general basically requires that they do a full-blown custodial arrest, taking you in to see a magistrate. All right, so let's see. I'll let you read through this. You know the deal here. There were plates on the back. They were not license plates because they're not required in California. And many of you have already seen some of my other videos. You'll see the video where I have a captain commander who's confirmed that they're not required. I got that confirmation from him because I thought that a police officer would respect that more. And I think it's possible that kept me from being towed that day. The officer that pulled me over did not tow me. He let me go home, knowing that I did not provide him with a driver's license. I did not say I didn't have one. I never said anything of that nature to him. But I did say that it was all contingent on the issue of registration, which it is. Everything falls into place after that, because the moment you register, you're declaring that the automobile you have is being used as a vehicle, which is basically a commercial term for a commercial automobile. And if you're engaged in any sort of commerce, you better have that driver's license, because it's a privilege to engage in commerce upon the roads. That's what all the laws, all the acts say that I have up on my channel, and that I've dug up. It was around the 50s or so that they started playing games with this a little bit, or 60s, and they've still acknowledged the difference between those that engage in commerce and those that don't in some California 60s cases, but it was sometime after that when they started really playing games, and they just flat out don't even admit that the separation is there. And it's like right now they don't even want to deal with what traffic is. They don't want to deal with what the definition is. I have video of trying to get the cop to give me what does traffic mean, and boy, that judge and the lawyer jumped right in. They did not want him to address it, because if he says, like, the cop isn't going to know, unfortunately. These cops are being used as pawns. I can empathize with them. The guy that I dealt with was a gentleman, but this is business. Just like he issued that ticket to me when he shouldn't have, but he did it, and he thought that was the appropriate action for him at that time. It's business for me to file a lawsuit against him and to tear him down when he gets on that stand, because unfortunately he's been put in a position of being a pawn. The Bar Association has established the core curriculum for these police academies, and they're basically training all these guys to go out and commit crimes, and they don't know it. And it's, with the traffic law in particular, like, just probably 90% of their stops are them committing crimes. It's a violation of the law to make a seizure that doesn't comport with the Fourth Amendment, and every single one of those stops that they're doing where somebody isn't engaged in commerce, that's what's going on. And so, they're, some people are 100% anti-cop, and the thing is, I think, if you have decent moral people doing it that are actually familiar with what they're supposed to be enforcing, and it hasn't been constructed in a manner that it's over their head, or hiring requirements haven't been put in place that require that people with an IQ of a certain level or lower are the only ones allowed in, we wouldn't have so many problems. But, they're selecting people that aren't as intelligent. They're intentionally doing that now. And these guys are less likely to question the law, and, most of you know all that jazz, but, alright, let's see. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Yeah, so here we get to the issue of the warrantless arrest. Alright, so there's no such thing as a traffic stop. They don't have any... It's a colloquial term given to a warrantless arrest, a seizure, anything that falls under that Fourth Amendment protected set of issues. God, I'm really getting tired here. It is late. Alright, so this section is what gives HRS 803 is what gives authority. Alright, so here it is. Look it up yourselves. Now, a police officer or other officer of justice may, without warrant, arrest and detain for examination any person when the officer has probable cause to believe that such a person has committed any offense, whether in the officer's presence or otherwise. Alright, well, for the sections of this for the purposes of this section, a police officer has probable cause to make an arrest when the facts and circumstances within the officer's knowledge and of which the officer has reasonably trustworthy information are sufficient in themselves to warrant a person a reasonable caution in the belief that a crime has been or is being committed. Alright. Now, crimes are in their own category, separate from violations. Violations are a fine and fee only offense. Crimes can get you locked up. So, right here, I point out the fact that the reason that I was pulled over was for an alleged violation, and again, it's not a criminal behavior. I lay this out in some of my other filings. I'm going to try to get them up too. I don't know that I'm going to speak through them. It's tiring, and I there's just so much information already in these, and I feel like the information in these, plus me talking, may be a little difficult for people to try to digest, because this is supposed to be a learning tool and not edutainment. If you're in this for edutainment, just take a hike, go do something else. People doing that are wasting their time and wasting other people's time, because then they start, pulling the whole sovereign citizen thing and making the rest of us look like jackasses. So, let's see here. Alright, so a citation is not a summons. Now, the citation that the officer gave me, at the very bottom, it had a box that said summons on it. Now, putting that word on there does not make it a summons. And as I point out right here, it's actually only a court clerk that can issue a summons. You have to read this Rule 9. A judge can issue a warrant. So, judge will, be able to issue the thing that can send cops out to grab your ass and bring you in. The clerk can issue a summons, which will be mailed or served on you. And if you don't show up in a criminal matter, that's going to be a problem. You're going to wind up having a bench warrant issued. If it's a civil matter, they'll just default the case against you. So, handle your matters, people. Don't avoid showing up. That's just going to make things more difficult for you. Let's see here. So, yeah, look this section up right here. I included it here. I don't know if I'll include it in this video. This video is going to be really long, and I don't really feel like breaking it into chunks, so you guys can either watch it the whole way through or not, or at least download it or something, so it can be spread around for people to use and maybe learn from, because there don't appear to be very many competent people putting this sort of information out, at least, so that you can file written motions and actually have everything thought out and laid out without having a judge and a prosecutor orally try to throw you off of your oral arguments when you go into court, because they're going to do that. If you're really good, you'll be able to stay on point, and for the average person, for the average man or woman going in there, you're going to have difficulty staying on point when they start tag teaming, and they do whatever they can to distract you from the points that you're trying to make orally. Don't do it. Get these things filed in. This is always a part of the record. If you file written motions, if you need to appeal, it's automatically a part of the record that's going to go up to the Court of Appeals. If you do everything orally, you're not necessarily going to get your argument in that you need to get in, because they're going to cut you off when you start talking about this sort of stuff. If you think you can just go in and orally do it, they will cut you off. You will not create a record, and if you try to appeal it, you can pay to have the transcripts of the oral arguments sent up, but guess what? What's in there? Well, you didn't get your entire argument in, because these guys are shysters, and they tag teamed to keep you from creating a record. You file stuff and have it written, they can't get around it. It's filed. But another tip, when you go to file these things, you absolutely must have multiple copies. Generally, the court will take, I believe, one copy of brief, but you need to have at least a minimum of 2 copies for yourself. And when you go in, you have that clerk at the window stamp all of them right there and tell them, these 2 are for my personal copies, please stamp them. They'll stamp them. And, if you have any problem with them, filing and stamping stuff, then that's a pretty serious issue. It's time to get a camcorder and record that, or one of those spy pens or whatever. Just something to record that, because they're required to file it. In fact, you should go get the code that says they're required to and ask for their supervisor and deal with that. Alright, so back to this. The police officer is a member of the executive branch. They have no authority whatsoever to initiate a case. They cannot issue a summons. And let's see, So the summons there was never a summons issued, and they have to issue a summons. The clerk does, and then it has to be served upon you with the complaint. And so there was no complaint, and there was no summons. And again, writing the word summons on a citation does not make that citation function or act also as a summons. It's strictly a notice to appear, and by signing it, you're agreeing to go into court. But you're only agreeing to go in that one time. That's it. You're not agreeing even that there's even a case before you. And if you want to sign it, what I usually do, I didn't do this time because I forgot to, but it doesn't really matter because I'm attacking jurisdiction anyways. I know what I'm doing in court as far as the game plan. But if you're all worried about this, just sign your name and then put under duress, all rights reserved. That's it. That's all you got to do. The big thing is they're really not going to give a crap about what you sign there. What's really going to matter is this stuff right here that you're filing in. The record that you're creating. Is it stuff that's damaging or not? This is very damaging stuff. I mean, you should have seen the judge's eyes. Like, he looked like a deer in the headlights the first day I went in, and I was just doing oral arguments right then because I wanted to... I just wanted to see, could I get this knocked out right away by attacking these core issues and the fact that I had contacted the prosecutor's office and they had tacitly agreed that they hadn't initiated prosecution. I didn't know if there'd be a prosecutor there or not, and there was. In California, there generally aren't. In Hawaii, apparently there are. Alright, so, let's see. Let me discuss this. So read through this. This is very important. Only a licensed attorney can represent another person. Persons being, legal entities, the state, so on and so forth. They can make arrest. I was trying to point out here. The attorneys, the prosecuting attorneys, are authorized to make arrest, and they can issue a. If it was a prosecuting attorney that made the arrest or whatever that I was dealing with, then they could have at least possibly claimed that citation might have acted somewhat as a complaint, but it's still missing huge elements. Laying out the charges in layman's terms. Having a run-on sentence statement that's very vague. That's not a statement. It's not something that's even described in layman's terms. They use the term operator or the term operating or drive or whatever. And these are legal terms. They actually have definitions behind them. They need to spell that out for you. Let's see here. Alright, there we go. Back to the issue of they also, when they serve the verified complaint or information, they have to file a proof of service that they served that to you. They did, used whatever method that's allowed by law, and that they did that and they served it on you. This isn't in my case file. That's not there. So they haven't done what they need to do. It's more evidence that they haven't done what they need to do. And this is nitpicking. This is every single last little, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You haven't done all these things before you get to the letter T, where they're trying to get you to make a plea. They have to do all these other things before that. So you hammer them on each and every one of those. You don't drop them. You hammer the daylights out of them, and then, at some point, if you have to, you do what I'm doing right now, which is you indicate that you want to make an interlocutory appeal, and you base it on the fact that your due process rights are being violated each step of the way. They're dismissing or denying your motions, even though your motions are completely legitimate, and calling them out on procedural defects. And you take it to the next level, and generally the next level, each level up, if you're attacking certain things, they will try to put things in order, because they can't have that sort of thing come to light. I mean, it will cause them all sorts of problems. And like I said, I don't know what's going to happen with this case, especially as I'm able to make more of it public and it gets out. But they don't want this sort of thing being widespread. And, you know, if I can, I'll try to put more of this out there. Nobody's helping me. Hey, by the way, I'm going to try to set up either a Patreon or maybe a Hatreon account. Hatreon being a spoof on Patreon, because the Hatreon allows people to get funding even for things that are considered, I guess, taboo in terms of freedom of speech. And I support that, because right now you're not allowed to question who really runs things. And if you bring it up, anybody that has, you know, employment, they'll get attacked. They'll lose their job. They'll lose their employment. So, you know, as Voltaire said, to find out who rules over you, find out who you can't question. Now, who can't you question without getting severely attacked? Some of you are going to have a hard time with that, because there's so much brainwashing going on right now, and the use of technology to brainwash people through the media and whatnot, and decades of just absolute brainwash. So, back to this. Alright, so, let's see. This paragraph just lays it all out. You know, the issue of a lack of subject matter jurisdiction, because there hasn't actually been a complaint filed, and the complaint is what has the subject matter in it. That's what dictates whether or not it goes to this court or that court. Does this belong in family court? Does this belong in a court of general jurisdiction, etc.? It doesn't matter that a citation is sitting in a alleged case. You know, a case can't even exist without a complaint. So that's why I'm saying alleged case. So when they create that number and all, they're doing it unlawfully. It's you know, and these clerks don't know this either. Most of these clerks have no clue that, you know, certain things are supposed to be done by certain people before they're allowed to go and, you know, create a case. So let's see. And then, you know, the proper service of the complaint with a summons or warrant would give the personam jurisdiction to the court. Now, there's other issues tying in with jurisdiction. I'm not going to get into them right now. It's incumbent upon you. If you want to be able to fight this stuff well, then you need to read, and you need to read a lot. And you can, you know, figure out these other things with jurisdiction. I'm attacking certain core things and sticking with them because, quite simply, they never address them, ever. And these are things that there isn't going to be any question about whether or not the judge knows it. They know these things, and so does the prosecution. Let's see. What's next? Alright, so here's the issue. You know, the whole laying forth the subject matter, blah, blah, blah. Let you read this. Bring up the issue. Like, the guy that filed it doesn't have a license to practice law. He's not an attorney. You know, I'm glad the guy's a gentleman. If he sees this, I think you're a gentleman, and everything that I'm doing is on principle with the things that I've studied, just like, you know, you're trying to operate on principle. I don't know too much else about you, but, you know, you seem like run-of-the-mill average officer, not a power freak, and not somebody, you know, looking to hurt people or break bones. You seem like a decent guy, but, you know, unfortunately, again, this is the position these bar members have put both of us in, because they're not conveying what is honest and truthful about what traffic is. People are going to get to see the motion to suppress hearing, and they're going to see how 7 minutes were spent with the judge and the prosecutor, you know, trying to do everything they could to keep me from being able to ascertain, do you know what traffic is? What is traffic? You're a traffic enforcement officer. What does traffic mean? You ought to know that, and unfortunately, you guys aren't going to know that. And it's defined. There's a definition. In Hawaii, it's intrastate commerce, and it also means trade and transportation between, certain points. And transportation, that word itself, is a commercial term. It doesn't just mean, going from point A to B. It means going from A to B and making money doing it, because you're moving persons or property. Let's see. All right, so no verified complaint. Blah, blah, blah. We're almost done here. All right, so clerk of court has erred. I tried to basically give them an opening to get out of this by saying they erred, rather than, hey, you guys are systemically doing this. I did this systemic thing in California, and they shut down my suits on that because, it is systemic, and it's billions of dollars across the nation annually being unlawfully raked in, and they're not about to acknowledge that. The only thing that's going to bring this down is widespread public attention. But if you're a defendant, they cannot necessarily throw your butt in jail when they've made all these violations, because it's going to be a big problem if they throw you in jail and you don't drop it and you turn around and sue them on these things. It's much the safer course of action for them is to try to drop everything and leave you be, flag you as a headache guy or whatever it is. They knew where I lived in California for years after my case got dismissed. All they had to do was set a cop out in the cul-de-sac where I lived and snag me when I was going out to physical therapy or something. Not a big deal. That's all they'd have to do. But they never did it. And they knew exactly where I was. I'm less inclined to give out the various information at this point. If you guys knew half of what's going on with this case. I know they tapped my landline with this case because I had contacted a notary public. Let me scroll down. You guys can pause it and read this stuff, and I'm just going to add in a little extra info so that it's out there, the public can be aware of it, and if anything does happen to me, you guys will understand it's these guys did something. I've dealt with a lot of health issues. I would never harm myself. I would never do anything to instigate violence with these people. I think the solution to the problems we're dealing with is widespread awareness, and that widespread awareness is going to lead to action. And as I proposed before, the action needs to be the sort of thing like voter initiative, like in California, where they passed a constitutional amendment prohibiting bar members from all activity in the state, and basically initiate investigatory proceedings to determine the extent of their crimes. Because what I'm dealing with here is small potatoes. They're making billions off of it, but it's small potatoes. This is the less complicated stuff, this traffic stuff. The more complicated stuff is where they've set up things with Wall Street and God knows. The CAFR. Many of you may have heard of CAFR. C-A-F-R. Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Every corporation has to issue these, and apparently, as many of you may also know, these courts are actually not de jure government institutions. These are corporations. They're listed on Dun & Bradstreet. You can go to dnb.com and you can plug in the corporation's name. You could look up, say, Los Angeles Police Department. It's a corporation. They're bringing in money, and they've got investors. And, the way that this is structured, they're going to keep plundering and raping as much as they can, because you've got several dynamics at work. One, because they're a corporation, they need to bring in profit by increasing the things that can be considered violations and infractions. They can try to steal more money for various things against the public. And that money, large chunks of that are going into the corporation. The corporation has the investors. God only knows who, I mean, these are probably like part of the dynasties, like, families and stuff. And the people you cannot question, lest you lose your job and be ostracized and outed by society and called a certain 4-letter word. And no, it's not a curse word, but it may as well be. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, yeah, the nature of how it's structured is going to keep it going and keep it fired up, because they also print money. And as they print money, they devalue it. And it's an exponential game. So the longer they're doing it, the less value that currency has. So the less value it has, the more they're going to have to collect. So you guys see the problem here. They have these certain rackets in place that require certain fraudulent behaviors increase. And, it's a shame that things are getting violent too. I mean, they're picking guys out that even older cops are scared of. I mean, or not necessarily just scared of, but looked down upon. These are thugs that are getting in there, and you're seeing that on YouTube. Again, it's not everyone, but they're in there, and the fact that things are structured in a us versus them format does not benefit anybody. Doesn't benefit anybody. It doesn't benefit the cops either. It puts them in a position where they got to toe that blue line, or they're, basically outed by the others that do decide to toe the line, even though they shouldn't be. Alright, so let's see. We'll go down to here. This is verified. See, this is the sort of thing that would be on a complaint. I'm verifying it. This isn't the one I filed. The one I filed has my signature. I'm not going through scanning all that crap up. Sorry. All you're going to get is my signature, and way up here at the top, you're going to get a couple stamps from the clerk saying, when it was filed, blah, blah, blah. So let's go back down here. Yeah, that's it. I have a lot to say, but this is extremely long at this point, and I don't expect, I don't know if too many people will listen this long. Even if they do, YouTube, I think, is messing with my counter also, so it makes it difficult for me to get the reinforcement I need by seeing that, yes, okay, this is getting out there, people are seeing it, it's useful. When I see that, I put time into doing certain things and only a few hundred people have seen it after a year, like, is that a legitimate count? Or is YouTube playing with it to help create, I guess it's almost punishment, because it's like to put time into something like this, to expect people to look at it and say, whoa, I could learn a lot here. This guy actually won this, or got his, one case dismissed. I don't get the feedback I need. It's reinforcing if I see a higher count, because it's getting out there. The information's getting out. If it's lower, it's not reinforcing. But I know I can't trust it. So, like, my motivation based on my health and everything else dictates whether or not I get around to putting these things up. If I saw that I was getting, say, many more hits, I mean, shoot, I had a no driver's license case dismissed, and it took me, like, I haven't even cracked 100,000 hits, and that video I put up was put up in 2012. You would think that would interest people. And again, I don't know. Are they playing with my view count or not? I know the videos are playing. It requires reading. And some of these videos initially weren't great resolution, but it's good enough that I would think, it would draw people in. Shoot, I saw other people with over 100,000 hits, but they had questionable videos. The one guy's video said he even had a driver's license at it. And he eventually pulled it down, and it's like, you know, did he pull it down because he did have a driver's license, and, you know, somebody called him out because they looked the case up, and the guy's full of it, and he decided to post his video around the same time I posted mine, and I've got a legitimate win, you know, no driver's license since 2009. I just quite simply let mine expire. I would have written them and, you know, done the routine that some people do, but again, with my health issues, certain things are limited, and I just figured, you know, based on what I read, it doesn't matter. If it expires, that's done. The contract's done. It doesn't extend beyond that. They can't do anything to you. They can't pretend as if it's still there. And when the officer for this case in Hawaii went to look me up, he couldn't find anything, to the best of my knowledge, for, you know, registration or anything like that in California, because I've never registered any automobiles over there. You know, so anyways, if you guys found this useful, please comment. If you didn't find it useful, well, you know, tough. And for all the people that are collecting paychecks, acting as pawns, and actually being the powers behind the pawns that decide to comment in a negative way, you're wasting your time. I'm just going to delete it. I don't care. And, you know, it's my channel. I'm just going to delete it. That's how you guys handle things yourselves. You just go and censor stuff. So I will delete your stuff, and I'm just going to leave the useful things up so other people can hopefully benefit. But, you know, when you come on and say stupid things like, oh, you didn't win, blah, 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 you know, it was a technicality. It's like, no, you retard. Like, I laid out the law, and that law you're calling a technicality, but calling it a technicality doesn't mean it's not the law. It's the law. I laid it out. The judge acknowledged it. In the first case, I have the transcript posted, the portion where the judge said, oh, I see your point, or your point is well taken, blah, blah, blah. But then she changed the topic so that she could try to create her excuse, her reason for dismissing the no driver's license charge based on other things. Because she did not, and those other things come after jurisdiction. Jurisdiction's required before they can even consider these other things. So, anyways, I don't care. Go ahead and post whatever negative things you want to post. I'll just delete them. It's simple procedure for me.